Why, hello there, old sports, and welcome back to another video. What is that?
Trobbio! Pirantes, orala yaba. Obrava, orala yabo. Pirantes, orala yaba. Obrava, orala yabo. Pirantes, orala yaba. Obrava, orala yabo.
Ah, what the hell? My head hurts. God. Anyways, as the local nuisance was saying,
Trobbio!
I mean the special guest, we're going to be beating the game today as Trobbio, or at least trying to imitate him as much as possible. To achieve this glorified cosplay, and to bring the might of the stage to Pharloom, we are going to be using some tools right off the start to better fit the vibe and aesthetic. I will be sticking with the Hunter's Crest for this whole playthrough, but I am allowed to upgrade it, and I am allowed to bind other crests. I'm just not allowed to use them for combat, so I just need to beeline straight to a bench if I unlock a different crest. For my red tools, I'll be using the Pin Pillow to mimic Trobbio's Confetti Bomb attack, as well as the Delver's Drill to mimic his Tornado attack. For my blue tools, first off, I will obviously be using the Claw Mirrors, for obvious reasons. And then on top of that, to improve the power of the Claw Mirrors, I will be using the Multi-Binder, which will give me an additional Mask of Health whenever I heal, but more importantly, it will proc the Explosion twice. For my yellow tools, I decided to go with the dice because they're the only yellow tool worth running for combat, as well as the barbed bracelet for literally the exact opposite reasons as the dice, and so this challenge run will actually be mildly challenging. With all that being said, this butterfly has a weapon, please help me, please, please, please!
Trobbio!
Now, starting out the challenge, I'd like to address something that you may be seeing in the top left-hand corner. I had Rune Rage equipped as part of this build because it kind of looks like one of Trobbio's attacks with the fireworks, but then I remembered that Rune Rage sucks, and I only used it like 3 or 4 times throughout this whole run, so eventually I just kind of stopped using it, and I had to switch it out for Silk Spear anyway to get to the Bell Beast, so yeah. Also, as you've probably noticed on screen, Moss Mother is getting mollywopped because it turns out Pin Pillows do a lot of damage, especially this early in the game when you're not supposed to have them yet. Also, like usual with my challenge runs, if I'm not covering something, just assume I'm running past the enemies to not waste resources / time. On top of that, considering how expensive the Pin Pillows are, you kinda have to be more careful with how you use them, so you don't want to just spam them at any opportunity. I usually wanted to save them for bosses. And of course, along the way, I picked up some quest items so I could turn them in later for various rewards like rosaries and shell shards. While I fight the Bell Beasts to unlock our first Silk Heart and of course fast travel, I'd like to talk about how I use the tools we have in this challenge. First of all, the Delver's Drill is a lot more situational than I thought, and that's mostly because most of the bosses tend to move around fast enough to where you can only hit them for like half the drill's duration, at most. So usually it's just better to pogo on the enemies instead of using the drill because you get some like slight invincibility frames when you do that at least. On the bright side, at least the tool is relatively inexpensive, so on the off chance we do need to use it, it's not going to cost us that much, all things considered. Originally I was going to talk about the other tools during the Bell Beast boss fight, but she's already defeated, so that's kind of a problem. Well, I guess I'll just talk about them while I defeat this arena. So first of all, the Pin Pillow is a very interesting tool because while it does decent damage, the low carry count, as well as its high shell shard cost at 10 per Pin Pillow, it kinda makes it hard to justify using it on basic fodder enemies. So usually, my strategy was at the beginning of boss fights was just to use as many Pin Pillows as quickly as I could, and then just start doing damage normally now that a good chunk of the boss's health is missing. And before going over the other tool I wanted to talk about, I wanted to point out that it's very important that we get as many crafting kit upgrades as we can so our tools will do more damage. And funnily enough, I actually only ended up getting 2 of the 4 on this run, but that was mostly just due to laziness and wanting to go back into previous areas, so I can only blame myself. And now, while I fight Lace, I'd like to talk about the best tool in our arsenal, which is, funnily enough, Trobbio's claw mirrors. While the red tools we're using are kind of gimmicky, I would legitimately argue that the claw mirrors are a legitimately good tool. And yes, part of that may be due to the fact that I gave myself the upgraded version at the beginning of the run instead of the basic version, so that might be on me, but these mirrors do ridiculous damage. They do a good burst right when you heal, and then they also have a little damage over time effect on enemies, so that's always extremely helpful. Add on top of that the multi-binder tool, and you're basically double the damage of the claw mirrors, which is already absurd, as I just said. So due to the fact that I'm pretty sure you don't get any damage fall off, it's just doing ridiculous amounts of damage. Screw the Everbloom, I don't know why we had to go through all that trouble to get that. We could have just used the light of Trobbio to destroy the void, or fend off the void, whatever. Anyways, after doing the very tedious and unfun grind for the Drifter's Cloak, I go fight the 4th chorus, and I would say this was a bloodbath, but the 4th chorus is a robot, so technically it was a cog bath. Please laugh. Anyways, I almost died to the rock falling on me, but I barely survived, thank God. After a quick stroll through Greymoor, I reach the Moorwing and then quickly kill it with the power of explosives before moving on to Bellheart and Shellwood. And on my way to Sister Splinter and the Cling Grip by extension, I get another mask, which funnily enough was completely useless because I never got another mask after this, and the problem is when I only have 5 masks, going up to 6 does jack shit, because single hit damage gets turned into double damage thanks to the Barb Bracelet, so we can still only take 3 hits there before dying, and then a double hit gets turned into 4 masks of damage, which is still a 2-shot with 6 health. So I don't even know why I went to the trouble of getting another mask if I didn't get another mask after that. I'm an idiot. That's the lesson here. Now the thing about this challenge is that I kind of came up with it on a whim, so I didn't really think about how challenging it would be. And then the problem here is that as I'm showing the Widow and Sister Splinter fights, they go down very quickly. It only took like a minute and a half to defeat both of these bosses, so only about like 3 minutes combining them together. And if anything, the Barb Bracelet is at its most detrimental at this point because we don't have any nail upgrades and it doesn't affect tool damage. So if anything, we're basically doing little to no extra damage and taking double damage in return. But the problem is, I've no-hit all the bosses in Act 1, so I know how to dodge all these bosses pretty well. And when I'm not dodging them well, I'm kind of just standing there mashing the attack button as much as I can. So I'm kind of worried this challenge isn't very challenging. I also feel bad because I feel like this video isn't going to be very entertaining and I feel like I'm letting you guys down, but I'll think of something, I guess. I think another problem is since the tools we're using come later in progression, their base damage kind of just outscales the bosses, so that's not really helpful in the difficulty department. Chalk it up to Puppet Wraith to be one of the few challenge YouTubers actively complaining that the challenge isn't challenging enough. I don't know, maybe this is my reward or punishment, I guess, for doing that Hollow Knight Steel Soul challenge without any normal healing. So the game just wanted to throw me a bone. Anyways, after defeating Widow, I do all the usual post-Widow boss fight Bellheart stuff, like giving all my relics for money, going to the pin shop and upgrading my needle, which is, I just think it's weird. That's like, because what does he do? Because we don't really see any other bugs in Pharloom using pins that aren't like Citadel adjacent or Citadel like part of that faction. And he's talking about how he has like a backlog of pins he needs to clean, but no one else uses, like none of the pilgrims use pins really, because they're trying to be like pacifists, sorta. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me, but I shouldn't complain. Anyways, after that, now that I have the needle in, I went to the Weave Nest to upgrade my crest, and then from there I just started completing random wishes because I just felt like it and I wanted the rosaries for later because I knew I would need them. Now that I think about it, I probably should have tried to turn this challenge into like a how fast can you beat sort of deal, but I wasted a lot of time completing random wishes, so I guess that idea's out the window. After getting a second crafting kit upgrade for my tool damage, I decided that I would go through the Mist to get into Act 2 via fighting Phantom. And funnily enough, Sinner's Road wasn't a problem at all, because usually what makes the enemies there annoying is that they'll try to fly away from you, but the range of the claw mirror is more than enough to just flashbang them out of existence. Now the Mist thankfully went very well this time around, because I feel like the Mist is one of those areas that's kind of hit or miss in terms of it will either take you 1 attempt or 30. I got really lucky with how the Wraiths decided to spawn, so I was able to maneuver around most of them. And then the ones I did have to fight, they went down pretty easily because I had the full like focus bar from the Hunter Crest as well as Barb Bracelet multiplying my damage a little bit. So it only took like 4 or 5 hits to kill him. And from there, all we need to do is follow the silk flies to end up in the exhaust organs. Now the fight with Phantom was actually pretty fun because I think we're starting to reach the end of the part of the game that we're outscaling things, which makes sense because I always found Phantom a little harder than Last Judge, which I guess makes sense because they're more off the beaten path. Anyways, the most notable thing I realized during this fight is that the Delver's Drill isn't actually going to be that helpful, because lots of the bosses we're going to be facing that are actually somewhat difficult move around enough to where the Delver's Drill is going to be hard to, like, optimally use, and then the Pin Pillow is just showing itself to be more generally useful, because even if the boss is moving around a lot, you can always just throw it in their face point blank and it won't hurt you, so you can usually get value out of the Pin Pillow more consistently than you can with the Delver's Drill, at least for the more mobile bosses. On top of that, the Delver's Drill also locks you in place for a little bit, which can make you susceptible to taking damage, and considering we have the Barbed Bracelet, we want to avoid that more often than not. To actually talk about the boss for a moment, when Phantom does their like phase transition attack where they do the like mist slam a couple times in a row, try to return to the middle of the arena as often as you can, because sometimes if they start to do it on the edge of the arena, you can sometimes be trapped and not be able to get to away from the blast in time. So just keep that in mind, I guess. And going off script for a moment, I just realized how funny it is that Trobbio manages to be more dramatic than a literal Phantom of the Opera reference. What the hell? He's simply built different, I guess. Anyways, moving on. Now, instead of continuing on into the Citadel, I decided to just unlock the Bellway station and then return back to the Blasted Steps, where I could go fight the Last Judge. Now at this point in the challenge, I hadn't decided if I was going to do the true ending or just the normal basic Weaver Queen ending, and while I did go with that second option, I decided that later on, so I just figured for now, since I wasn't sure if I was going to do Act 3 yet, might as well kill the Last Judge so I don't have to do it later, and so the fight is a little bit more challenging, because if I come back later with more equipment, I'll stomp this boss even harder than I already did. Now, you'd have a hard time telling this from the footage, but the Last Judge is actually pretty easy to read, and the thing is, if you're not being impatient like I was and just mashing the attack button, you can actually just weave between attacks pretty seamlessly and easily. Just hit her once or twice, retreat, wait for her to attack, run back in, hit her once or twice, rinse and repeat. Really, the hardest attack that the Last Judge has is like the swing where she takes her sensor and swings it around herself, but that's only because it's the quickest attack to start up, so you always need to be on the watch for it, because if you're being patient and looking out for it, you can dodge it consistently, but if you're being impatient and not paying attention, that will hit you a lot of times, so keep that in mind, I guess. Anyways, with her dead, we can move on to
Trobbio!
Now, even though I did kill the Last Judge, since I killed Phantom as well, I already have access to the eastern side of the Citadel. So what I do is I use the Bellway station to go back to the Grand Bellway, then make my way up to the first shrine. And of course, after activating the bell inside the shrine, it's time to get a nice welcome from the Citadel, via the Clockwork Dancers. I keep saying clockwork, it is cogwork. I need to stop doing that. Now, the thing about the Dancers is since they're literally the most telegraphed boss in the game, it's very easy to position yourself if you know what you're doing. And thankfully, I know what I am doing. So the thing is that since we've upgraded the Hunter's Crest, we get the Focus mechanic, which is basically a 1.3 times damage multiplier if we hit the boss enough without getting hit ourselves. And then the thing is, it's just really easy to just wail on the Dancers. I'm just gonna be blunt. And due to said telegraphing on how the Dancers move, it's very easy to hit both of them at once with the Claw Mirrors, dealing very heavy damage to them. So to put it bluntly, we were going through these phases like a hot knife through butter. I didn't even need my tools. I could have done this very easily without any tools. I know I kind of brought this up in parts earlier, but I do think it's incredibly funny that using 9 silk for 1 bind to use the dazzle mirrors is more efficient than using 4 to use rune rage on average. I just think that's funny. That's the superior option. And if I'm remembering correctly, that one time I used Rune Rage on the last judge was the last time I used the skill of the whole game. So, that's funny. Claw Mirrors for the win, I guess. Trobbio just cannot be beat. The light of the stage is no match for the light of literally demigods. Okay, not literally, but still. Okay, so you know how I went on that whole spiel about how I only got one mask and it didn't end up ever mattering? Yeah, I wasn't being completely honest there, and by completely honest, I mean I was being completely dishonest. I actually got a 7th mask, but it still barely helped at all. There was only one arena in the whole game that actually had any impact on it, because all the bosses from here on out do double damage. So in a way, I'm still slightly right, and that's good enough for me. Anyways, defeating the Cogwork Dancers gives us access to the Whispering Vaults, and from there, I made sure to go grab the pale oil from the little storeroom and then go back and upgrade my needle again. And with that, it's time for what you've all been waiting for.
Pirantes, orala, obrava, orala yabo. Trobbio! What? Paloma, gana. Trobbio! Atua! Whoop-ah!
Anyway, now that that's out of the way, we can freely go down into the Underworks and go get the Claw Line ability. And from here, it's basically just a sprint to the end, because the only two bosses that are left are Lace and Grandmother Silk. But, of course, we still have to do the High Halls Gauntlet as well, so that's technically 3 bosses, I guess. Regardless, in terms of getting the first 2 melodies, the Vault Keepers and the Architect's melodies, those are very easy. They were just no pain at all to get. It was just running towards the objective, get the thing, and then move on. But I'll just skip ahead to the High Halls Gauntlet, because I'm sure that's what you guys want to see. Thankfully for me, I managed to defeat the High Halls Gauntlet on my 2nd try, and I would have done it on my 1st try too, if it wasn't for the 2, big bell guy enemies. Their attacks do not overlap very nicely. It's quite annoying, to be honest. The funny thing is, the Claw Mirrors are really good against single-target enemies, but they're even better against crowds of enemies, and during a gauntlet, that's exactly what you're going to be dealing with. And due to the other challenge runs I've done for Silksong that involve fighting through the High Halls Gauntlet, I'm very used to how to kite around the enemies and how to exploit their AI. So on top of that, it's really easy to build focus for our Hunter's Crest. And then from there, you can kind of just lay waste to the waves of enemies the thing throws at you. So on the second attempt, when the two bell clapper enemies dropped down from the ceiling, I didn't want to take any risks, so I just melted one of them with pin pillows before they could react and start attacking me too much, and after a little bit of effort, one of them did go down, and from there, the second one fell soon after. After getting the last melody, we can obviously now go fight the final two bosses, and Lace, yet again, is one of the best fights in this whole game, and no one will convince me otherwise. But that doesn't matter. What does matter is if the power of Trobbio can defeat Lace, and yes it can, what were you expecting? While we learned in the first fight with her that the Delver's Drill is pretty much useless here, the Pimpillos are still useful if you know how to aim them correctly, which can be difficult because Lace jumps around a lot. But you can kind of learn to throw one when she backsteps, and then usually it will land right on her and explode. I'm also sure this probably has something to do with the fact that I have an Act 3 tool, but I almost entirely skipped Lace's Phase 2 and skipped straight to Phase 3, because right after she did the laugh to signify a phase change, she then did the cry to signify the second phase change, so that was silly. But other than that, this was a pretty normal Lace 2 fight. The most interesting thing is that since we have the claw mirrors and their range is like such a wide circle around us, we can jump up into the air like we would be healing even if we don't need to heal, and we're still taking a good chunk out of her health bar, but again, I digress. I died 7 or 8 times to Lace, and hopefully her mother is a bit harder because I'm getting tired of the penultimate boss being more difficult than the final boss. Thankfully, I was proven incorrect, as Grandmother Silk was much more difficult than Lace was, or at least moderately more difficult. Now this is partially because our hardest hitting attack goes from doing 3 masks of damage all the way up to 6, which is more than the 4 that Lace can do, obviously. Now you may be thinking, Puppet Wraith, that only applies to the web snare attack. And yeah, you're right, but for some reason that was the attack I kept getting hit by. Because whenever I tried to heal to use the claw mirrors, Grandmother Silk would always use her web snare attack, and then I'd end up falling right into it or getting hit by it mid-heal. Or what would also happen is I would be in the perfect position to dodge the first snare and then fall into the second one, so that was always terrible, and that killed me like 9 out of the 10 times I attempted this fight. Other than that, the fight was moderately difficult. I'm not going to say it was super easy, but it wasn't super hard either. I just kept being stupid and falling into the same trap over and over because I'm insane. Due to the fact this boss doesn't have a passive hitbox, it's very easy to just jump into her and then throw the Pimpillo, instantly detonating it, which will do heavy damage, and since we have like 6 Pimpillos, that's a lot of damage we can just throw out really quickly. Now unfortunately I do have some bad news, that being that the final hit was not landed with the claw mirrors, but instead a Pimpillo because I mistimed the counting, or I was counting the health numbers incorrectly in my head. I know you are all very much let down by this, and going forward I will be better. However, with that being said, this means I have completed the challenge, but before you leave I have 2 very important things to talk about. First of all, if this video gets 10,000 views and just enough support in general, I will make sure to do this challenge in Act 3, but make it much more difficult while still sticking to the spirit of the challenge. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is that, I hit 10,000 subscribers somehow. I'm still very surprised about that. So I'm going to do a Q&A. So I'm going to have a pinned comment down below saying, hey, ask your questions here, and then if you have any questions you want me to answer for you, just leave them down under that comment, and I'll try to answer as many as I can in my next video, which will be a 10,000 subscriber Q&A special mabob thingy. I said that incorrectly. You get what I mean. And of course, before we go, I would like to thank my 4 channel members for their continued financial support. I don't know if I could do this without you, and I appreciate you so much beyond what I can describe. So, thank you. With all that being said, thank you for watching this video and giving me some of your time today. If you liked this video, please consider commenting, subscribing, and hyping if you're on mobile. Any support you give means the world to me. So, with all that being said, I keep saying that, I apologize. Have a good day, and good night.